It's the New Schools Podcast. Welcome. Today our guest is none other than Jana Pappas, founder, along with her husband Jason, of Acton Academy in Concord, California. Jana is a former classroom teacher, a leader of teacher education courses, tutor of students with language processing differences, and homeschooler. But now she's excited to be a part of the education revolution by offering an Acton Academy in her community. Jana believes in student-led education, learning from real-life experiences, guiding students to find a fire within them and to follow their curiosity. If you're looking for insight into the process of starting a school like an Acton Academy, you'll find it in this conversation. You'll hear about Jana's journey from being a teacher in a traditional school to becoming a Socratic guide, designing quests for learners, her biggest obstacle in starting an Acton Academy, and her experience with students who have ADHD and language processing differences. Now here's your host, Shannon Falkenstein, with Jana Pappas from the Acton Academy, Concord.
I do always just love to hear, like, who are you? What, where are you? How did you get here? I mean, a lot of what I want to talk about is just like, what was your call to adventure? Like, what's your origin story for why did you start an Acton?
Well, thank you so much for letting me do this. It's been exciting. Just looking forward to it. We started looking into Acton about a year ago, year and a half. And it all was led up to by my just passion for education. So I went into education world. I mean, when I was in fourth grade, I had this amazing teacher. And from that point on, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a teacher like her. And so that was when I decided I wanted to be a teacher and went to school for it. I volunteered in elementary schools. I did all of it. So I taught in a public school, many different grade levels. And then it never felt right. It never really felt like I was doing what I wanted to do. And I didn't feel like the learners were really getting what they needed. So I left the public system when my kids entered it, and we were still just going, gosh, they're just not getting what they need. It just didn't settle well. So, years go by, we pull them out and homeschool them for just 2 years. And after the second year, they were all still wanting more, still needing more. So we then put them in 3 different schools where we thought their needs could be met better. My son was at a school just for dyslexics. It's a private school for dyslexics. My daughter went to a very small private Christian school, and our oldest went to like an arts charter school. So we thought, okay, maybe this is it, And while they were at school, I then continued building my business, tutoring business, and it felt better working with students one-on-one, really giving them what they needed. They were coming to me with a need, and we were sort of able to find a way to fill it. And that's where the whole curriculum of, finding what curriculum works for them, what the best, pace to take with each student. And that really sparked a, yes, this is it. But how can I do this on a larger level? So the end of a couple of years had gone by while the kids were in their different schools. Everyone was still like, we're not getting what we need. So I had a parent approach me, one of the parents of the students that I had at the time, and asked if I wanted to open a school, if I wanted to do that. And that had always been a dream of mine. And so we partnered up and started talking about it. And we started doing research, and I found Courage to Grow. I found the story of the Sandifers and what they did. And I was totally hooked. It was like a door opened, and I just couldn't wait to run through it. Like, this is it. This is the type of education that I want to be a part of. So I shared with my family, and they were excited and on board. The parent that was interested was on board. So we applied, and I was actually turned away the first time I applied.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Which I don't talk about a lot because it's, I don't feel proud of that, but I also know that that's how processes work sometimes. So
yeah, it's part of your story. That's great. So then what happened?
Yes. So I took the information that I was given back, the feedback that I had, and one of them that really was like, oh, it's not going to work in an Acton was to give direct teaching to language processing difficulties, kids that learners that have a hard time with language processing. That's sort of my background and my specialty. And so I put in there that, I would offer direct teaching for those students. And that just doesn't jive with the Acton way. So I then changed that, and they can do that after school. That's an option for our school for learners that need it and choose it. They can have that special tutoring and time after school. So I reapplied, and I just put my all in. I took my time, did more research, really honed in on the Acton way, and then was accepted after that. And then we just took off. That was May of 2019, April or May. And so then we had to wait until October to go to our orientation. And as soon as we got back, we launched October of 2019. So we did sort of a beta year, I call it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, because you started like after the normal academic year starts.
Right.
And so tell me more, like what's your building like? How many kids do you have?
So we started in our home, and I had just the three learners. I had a kindergartner and 2 third graders. No, a third and a fourth. And then in January, we were able to move into a studio, and we brought on 2 more learners at that time. And then that was January. March, we were all sent home. So as soon as we got into our studio, just a few months later, we all needed to do distant learning. So we finished our year distant, from home. But we've also decided to leave the studio and bring it back to our property so that we can be outside. The studio didn't have the outside space we wanted and needed, so we're going to come back to our property and do this school year with 10 on our property, all outside. And so we're hoping and praying that we'll have a new studio as soon as possible. We're looking.
Great. Well, tell me, so are your children part of the Acton?
So this is also hard to talk about. My oldest actually she graduated early. She's 16, and she just started some college classes that she really is interested in. She loves science and she loves art. So those are just so different. So she's just going to go explore and do some education on her own at a local junior college. So that's her story. My middle daughter, she's going into 9th grade and just started distant learning. She plays sports, loves sports. It's part of her motivation for school. So because we're so small, we don't have sports yet. So she's going to continue at her charter school. And then my son, he's going to finish the program at the School for Dyslexics, and then he'll join us, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yeah, interesting. So that's kind of different than other schools, but I really appreciate you giving your perspective because not everyone's path is exactly the same. And our goal with this podcast, at least for now, is that we want to be talking to parents who have that same feeling that you had and the same feeling that I had and that the same feeling that so many people have of like, something isn't working. Like I'm frustrated or I'm disillusioned or it's just, I feel like I'm wasting time or something isn't right. And now I want to explore something else. And we find that a lot of parents get to that point of like, I know I want to do something else, but then taking the leap of faith is like, no, I'm not ready yet to do that. And so we want to help people hear stories of how I did it and, how I didn't do it and how then I did do it or whatever, I think all the stories are just helpful for everyone because everyone's story is so different and so
I agree.
Special.
And with our daughters being the ages they are, 14 and 15, it was 13 and 15 when we first started up. They really needed to have their own say. And
yes.
So does our son. He is 11, but he was much more like, he wanted to start with us right away. Where his needs, he really needed to finish the program at his school too. So it was really different. We were really hoping the girls would choose to join us and make their story with us. But that's just not how it has panned out. So Cameron hopefully will join it. He might be the only one, but at least we have the option. And, I really believe it would be a great choice for all of them. They have their own stories though,
Yes. And Acton is about freedom and choice and being a lifelong learner and being learner driven. So I think you're doing it. I think you're really doing it. I'd love to hear, and you kind of talked about it, but just tell us a little bit more about that moment when you were like, this, Acton, this, like, where were you? What were you doing? And I'm like, who did you tell first?
Okay. So I had been researching online disruptive learning and watched a couple of the TED Talks. I don't have the names of them off the top of my head. So I watched a couple of those. I read and then re-listened to Courage to Grow. And it just struck me deeply, right in my heart, that this was the right path for the way I want to be a part of education from here on out. And that everything had just sort of led up to this. I've always believed and know that there's science behind when young humans get to choose what they're going to research, what they're going to spend their time on, and what they really want to delve into. And that's where I know a big part of me when I was in the classroom, every now and then we'd be doing something and it was just time to stop, time to move on. And I consciously would notice certain students be disappointed that they had to close that book or that they had to switch gears. And in my heart, I thought, this is really a shame because they could have continued doing what they were doing and learned so much because they had a natural interest. I know, but not everybody does, that your brain, when you're so excited and just intrinsically wanting to learn something or research something or have a purpose to know something, and you get to do it, that information just sticks. There's a place for it. When there's no place for it, you don't have the interest, aren't motivated to learn something, there's no place in your brain for it. It just sort of falls out, Or when you have a natural interest or a reason to know something and you get to research it and you get to learn it and teach yourself or ask questions, the information sticks. My son is profoundly dyslexic, and it was connecting sounds to symbols, the phonetic type. So although his comprehension is phenomenal, and it's really hard to know sometimes these brains in these young learners that have a hard time with connections like that because it just comes so naturally for everybody. People don't realize that sometimes dyslexic brains or, ADHD brains, things like that, they process differently. So what I'm getting at is my son, although maybe he doesn't read every day like a kid in the summer or, have a journal to spend time writing, I'll watch him do something that he loves and he's typing. He's researching ways to get his live streaming from not being delayed. So he has built this whole system around live streaming and figured out the code behind the camera. And he has learned so much, and he can communicate with his friends, and they type messages to each other on their YouTube, message boards. And he's doing so much writing, reading, coding, problem solving, engineering. He's doing so much, where someone just might come in and be like, oh gosh, that kid's just doing video games all day. I just see it so differently for him. He's doing so much. Really, when you break it down, it's just, they love it. He loves it. It doesn't have to be painful.
I love that. That's a great story.
Yeah.
That's a really great story. I was interviewing Ann Olderog the other day, and she and her husband have Acton Academy, Verona in New Jersey. And we were talking about fear, and that parents very often feel afraid, like, am I preparing my child? Shouldn't they be reading? Shouldn't they be writing? Shouldn't they be memorizing history or whatever it is? And COVID has been really interesting because, we're all like wary of the screens and all the things that we think are going to happen because of the overuse of screens. And, but during COVID, it's like, my kids have been on screens a ridiculous amount of time.
Right.
And, my son is 11 also, and he loves Minecraft. And then now he's met this crew of kids online. I don't know where these children live. I don't know if they are children. I don't know anything, but he knows because he's in a social relationship with them now. And they have names like Slaz and Ed and Nano, and these are not their real names. And I'm like, well, who is this person? My son's like, I don't know, Mom. Like, I know what I need to know, which is that he's really amazing at Minecraft, and that he really is amazing at these other like sandbox physics games that they play. And at some point, I just kind of had the courage to let go, and what happened when I did that was, first, I felt a tremendous sense of relief from the mom guilt. But secondly, I realized, like, my son is creating the world that he's going to live in, and he's creating the way that those relationships happen. And I really don't know anything about that, and that's okay. Beyond like keeping him safe, all the regular things, but it's like, go be a pioneer in your new world, because you're the one who's going to figure that out. And it sounds like you're having a similar experience with your son, of watching him thrive in this world that you and I don't even really understand, and that we don't have the capability to go into and use, and that they do. And that I just think that that's like kind of beautiful.
I do too. It is. And it's impressive what they do. It's just an intuitive for them.
Yes. Yeah. And that they're on this open road. Like, he can go and learn whatever he wants to. You and I, when we were younger, were like limited to what was in the school library, maybe, or the public library.
Neighbors' encyclopedias.
Right. And then now they're just on this never ending road. And I realized that, there are some dark places on the internet, and like, we talk about all that. And I'm, I think that until, we can talk more about that too. Like, parental controls I put, and within 5 minutes, my son knew how to get rid of them. Not because he wanted you to go and do something evil, but because they were infringing upon his work, like what he wanted
obstacles.
To do. Yes, exactly. Yes. Thank you. And so I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, he's going to be able to disable whatever I do. And so it's better. Like, I think at Acton, we kind of have the philosophy of inoculating from the inside, of like how to notice when something isn't, when you've gone into a dark place in the internet and you need to get out, and just like not going there. Right. I'm not saying that's I'm not saying that's like the total solution, but anyway, if you want to comment a little bit on your experience with that, I would be really grateful.
Yes. So that, when Jeff had mentioned, every now and then across the network, an email will come up about a breach in, one of the kids' computers, or, a parent accidentally sees, I don't know, it's every now and then it does pop up. Yeah. And it's bound to, when you are in this world of never ending information, the bonus is nothing can stop you from knowing something that you want to know. The negative is there are dark places. But when Jeff said, we empower our eagles to swipe away, and those dark places are not where you want to be. It's not a healthy place for your brain. And we swipe away, and you have the power to get out of there. And that's something, when I digested that, took away a lot of the guilt. And it also seemed to, my girls are so much older that I didn't have that knowledge when they were first delving in, and we just totally, we didn't have anything for them at his age. So it's different. But it empowered him too. And he'll now come to me and say, oh, I had to swipe away. And I'll ask, well, what was it? And it was all pretty innocent actually. But for him, it was a swipe away moment, you know, and he had that power to do that. And it was like, well done. You know, you have the power to do good and to go learn, and nothing can stop you from learning or knowing something that you want. And nothing's going to stop you from swiping away, shutting it down, and getting out of a place maybe isn't quite right for you at that age or at that moment. So that is something we do in our family. At the school, I do have some safeguards, and you know, our group is quite young at this point. We have a 6-year-old, several 10-year-olds, and then our oldest is 12. And so we do have some safeguards, and then we're just on the computer for core time. And then if something sparks a fancy and they want to go research something. So because our group is quite small and young, we have some safeguards on our Google Chrome books, and I can see everything at all the time. That hasn't been an issue yet. Let's knock on wood. But I imagine it will be, and that again is just part of their story and part of their generation, that they will be exposed to things that we never were. Yeah. And to empower them to get out of the situations, to tell or to process it in a healthy way really is more empowering than keeping them totally closed off from it.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's not going to go away.
It's not going to go away. Yes, I agree. Thank you. So tell me, you came from as a traditional educator. Mm-hmm. I did too. So I taught in public schools in New York City for several years, and the same thing where I was like, this is not exactly the thing that I want to be doing or how I want to be doing this. So shifting gears from that traditional educator into more of a Socratic guide. Are you guiding?
Yes, I am currently. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how has that been? I feel like that's a big shift that we have to make. I can be a control freak sometimes. Yes. So I have had, over the 4+ years of having our Acton now, it's just been like just taking off the armor and just letting go and learning, and that's been a really fantastic process. So tell me more about your transition from a traditional educator to being a Socratic guide.
Yes. So I sort of naturally am a guide. It does come somewhat naturally, only because of the experiences I've had, and then getting to see learners take the reins and the excitement that they have, and really how beneficial it is, whether they go in the direction that you anticipated or intended, or they don't. It's a bigger win than when you lead them to an end point. Did that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So
yeah.
I've always, not always, but I have for a long time had that just naturally. So being Socratic is a challenge. Not answering any questions is a battle every day. I'm getting better. And then as soon as I got my Eagles on board, this was last January when we got into the studio. Everything was kind of new. We sort of did a little tribe building again because we're adding 2 more Eagles. And I, at that point, shared with them my goal and not answering questions. So my best sheepdog with that was the 6-year-old. And she would often very kindly remind me that I had answered a question and to be careful. And so she really helped a lot. We'll see how it goes with so many new Eagles. I do think there's a time and a place to kind of do more direct teaching. And until I get a couple years under the belt and we have a good solid foundation of founding families and Eagles, I sometimes feel like I don't know how to introduce them to these procedures without directly guiding them, and it's a struggle. It's a struggle, but I'm getting better. And the Eagles are on board with my goal of not answering any questions. Nice. Socratic discussions go quite well, launches and things like that. The toolbox that's available to us with the launches, the videos, the questions that are there, it just makes it so user-friendly. So our formal launches and Socratic discussions go quite well. But I'm looking forward to growing and doing better with that this upcoming year.
Yeah, it's great. It is it's not just the kids who are learning, the Eagles who are learning, right? It's the guys, the owners, the parents. Tell us more about the parents. It sounds like a parent actually was someone who kind of helped push you toward your call to adventure. Tell us more about that.
She did. So she has 2 Eagles at our school, and I had been with them the year before. They're homeschoolers, and they would come once or twice a week for fun, just like writing or arts or, things like that. So they had come the year prior just to our house for my smaller business. And then the year before that, I had just the oldest daughter for a couple homeschool classes. So I knew that I'd known them now for about 4 years, and the mom was looking more into their girls being in a school, and she was not satisfied with anything that she could find. So then suggested, hey, how about we open a school? How about we do it? And so I had always dreamed about that and romanticized about us having a one-room schoolhouse, like an old-fashioned, school with a bell. I had always had this in my head. And so when she approached me, I just was so excited and I loved the prospect. And then it was diving into, how do we want to do it? What do we want to do? And that was when I found Acton. Just researching my, desires of the types of learning and the science behind, young brains and things like that all made sense to me when I found Acton.
And so you found Acton through like an internet search?
Yes.
Or did someone tell you about it?
It was internet search. Yeah.
And how many Actons are in California now, do you think?
Oh, there's quite a few. I think there are more than 10, less than 20. I'll put it at that.
Wow.
Yeah. There are several now.
It's maybe second only to Texas.
Possibly. Yeah.
Okay, if you could describe your school in just 3 words, what would you say?
Acton Academy Concord is a place of joy, safety, growing, learning together, failing together, getting back up together. It's a place I want to use magic. It's where the Eagles come and get to kind of rule their space and, mess up together, get messy together and learn and grow.
Nice. Thank you. And tell us about what was your favorite quest or their favorite quest last year, do you think? And maybe tell us what quests are, because not everyone knows. Yeah.
Yeah. So quests are whole studio adventures that focus on one piece of content or theme. So and they go on for one full session for us. So, for 5 weeks, 5 to 7 weeks, our sessions typically run. And we've done Build a Tribe, which I totally love. And we had so much fun doing the lip dub and, doing all the fun games as a group and things like that. I think they might say the chess quest was their favorite.
Oh, yeah.
Because they had a lot of fun playing. They got to do it online. We also had this beautiful chess set that they got to play with. And then at the end, the chess tournament. And it was one of our Eagles won the tournament against the parents and everything. At the time there were maybe 10 people in the tournament, but one of our Eagles won, and it's really exciting. And they just got so good.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really great.
Yeah.
That's really great. Thank you. So tell us, what was the biggest setback or obstacle in the beginning, and how did you overcome it?
Okay. So the biggest obstacle in the beginning was being turned away after my first shot at the application process. That was disheartening. And I took a couple days to recover. And I thought, and it really made me reflect. I really had a moment of reflection, and how wonderful that it happened this way, because that's so Acton-like, right?
Yeah, it really is. Like when you're saying that, I'm like, look, she so cool. Failed in air quotes, right? Because it's not really a failure ever. And you got back up, you took your time to feel your feelings and to recover, and then to decide what was your new strategy. There's nothing more Acton than that.
I love it. It didn't feel like it at the time, but when I was able to sit in it and reflect and think about it, I thought, this is such a cool story, that this is happening. So I immediately thought, this is Acton. I have another shot. I just need to try again. And so I did. I tried again. I put, all my effort in and really researched and got to know where my weaknesses were in my first application, and did it again. So that was, at the beginning, that was the biggest hurdle. And I reflected too on the fact that my whole life really has been that. I lived a very Acton-like life in hitting dead ends or failing and getting up and going again. My first time applying to get my credential, I didn't get into 2 different programs. By the third, I got in. But, I had the mindset of, this is what I'm going to do. Oh, well, I didn't get in there. I'm going to go over here and try there. And I didn't get in there, so I need to try there. And it's, those were my own experiences. But I had learned, too, that was just sort of how life went for me in the world of my being a student. I have my own language processing difficulties. And so I very often had to put extra effort in. I very often had to do things a different way. And so that was all just sort of part of my story. But when I got that email back of, I'm sorry, from Acton after our first application, it really kind of knocked me down for a couple days, because I just was like, this is exactly what I want. I know this is right. I know it. And so in that time of reflection, I was able to look back and go, wow, I've had this happen before. I can do this. And what a cool story. So, I love that. I love that that's part of our Acton testimony,
Me too. And I'm glad you got it in the end. I think that you deserve it.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
So one thing I think that I have noticed in my time of doing Acton is that a lot of people do feel frustrated with the traditional system, and then they're looking for something, and then you're there and you're like, I have this thing and it's new and it's different and it's really cool. and I would love for you to share it with you. But then sometimes people kind of color in the lines with what they want you to be, but they don't truly absorb what Acton really is, or if you have a different type of school, what that really is. And so they come expecting one thing and they get something else. And so I'm always trying to find better ways of communicating what we really are. And I think metaphor is a really good way of communicating for people. And so always when I interview people, I'm truly trying to discover some new metaphors. And so if I could pose that question to you, like looking at like the traditional system versus Acton, or Acton compared to something else, like what would be your metaphor for that?
I love this question. This one's already been used, but the swimming one, I love that, how do you show that you know how to swim, right? You do it. I love that one, but that's been used.
No, I've like literally never heard that one. So
okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, with Acton.
So like instead of passing a test about swimming, you like jump in the water and show that you can swim. Yeah.
And I've
asked, that's a really good.
Our Eagles the same thing. How can we show something without getting, a test grade or someone saying, yes, that person knows how to play chess, right? And how can you prove you know how to do something? And they came to that. Well, you just show people you can do it, right? Yeah. Then and that's the swimming one. You don't take a test. You don't have a person sit next to you and learn how to swim on paper and right. You just go do it. And the more experience, the more time in the water, the better swimmer you are. Right. And I feel like that is a great metaphor for Acton. It's just doing it, experience, testing it out, trying different tools, whatever the case may be.
That's good. Thank you. I like that one.
A better one, Shannon. I'll email you or something.
Yeah,
I love that. I love that. And my brain thinks like that. So I wish I could think of something right now to.
And it's complex. So I feel like when we, like I keep like gathering some. So that's nice. Right? I like that swimming one. Also, I have found that at least in our community, when we opened, that many people assumed this must be a school for like a special needs school, because they're like, why wouldn't you just go to one of the big fancy private schools? Like, why would you start a new school if you aren't looking for something for people who can't make it at the big fancy private school? So that was kind of like we had a lot of people coming to us like that. And of course we were never wanting to turn anyone away or be exclusive or anything like that. But at the same time, we didn't have the resources and the capability to provide any kind of special services. And we also didn't really know what we were doing. So we didn't really know like what we could provide and couldn't provide. So that was an interesting time. And since you said you have language processing challenges and your son has dyslexia, maybe you could bridge that gap a little bit. Like how, in a learner-driven environment, what would you recommend to someone who has learning challenges? How they could be in a learner-driven environment and have learning challenges? Like, is that possible? Is that desirable? And how would one do that?
Right. I don't think it's right for all of them. Any group, there's going to be a percentage that this type of education doesn't work for, and then the opposite. It's perfect for certain types of brains, right? And families. And it really is a family adventure. I do believe, everyone being on board is vital when they're joining.
Thank you for saying that. I think you're totally right. And that some people don't focus enough on that, myself included in the beginning.
Yeah. And one of the questions I'll ask our families is, are you prepared for your learner to fail, to hit frustration level, to not do math for 2 weeks straight? Are you prepared for that? Because it's very possible these things are going to happen. But if you're in for the long haul and you really kind of get Acton Academy and how we really are just guiding your little human to learning and growing on their own, then it's, it's a win-win. And for I keep saying humans, I get tired of saying learners. So for a young learner that has any kind of a language processing difficulty, or, any special need, or, sensitivity, they very often do quite well in an Acton Academy. I have quite a few in my small group of 10. And, I think they're drawn to us because of my background and things like that. But, dyslexics, for example, are very entrepreneurial, thinking outside the box. There's a statistic that says 70% of CEOs and successful entrepreneurs are dyslexic.
Yeah, like I think
Because of the way
Richard Branson.
The list goes on and on. Yeah.
Yeah.
So given that, it's a great place, and they're often very motivated and driven if they haven't experienced too much trauma.
Right.
If they have like PTSD because of the way they've been treated in the public school, it can be harder, because that's where I don't feel like I can serve, are learners that have behavioral needs or needs for therapy of some kind to process the experiences that they've had.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I don't feel like I can serve yet. But, any of the learning differences, or I have 2 that are on the spectrum, as long as you have some background knowledge of how to speak and you understand, I'm talking as a guide and a head of school, speak to and understand their needs, it really is pretty smooth. Just one example, I have a student that is on the spectrum, and distance learning is extra hard because this kind of conversation is insanely uncomfortable. Face-to-face, looking at eyes, trying to process language. So although it's sort of one of our boundaries is to have your screen on, we communicated, and he would either have his screen like this, or he was allowed to have it off. He was just able to concentrate better. And so, these little things that are called, an accommodation, right, in a public school, we do those things. Our whole school is kind of an accommodation. Very small groups. They each have their own computers. They each have their own programs and curriculum. They move at their own pace, on their own depth of concepts. It's very accommodating to most learners. So, I just see it as a great place for language processing differences, spectrum disorder. I hate saying disorder, spectrum difference, it can often be a really great place. It's the behavioral piece and the trauma piece that I don't feel confident in serving yet.
So I heard someone say a long time ago, I don't know if it was a video I watched or something, so fact check me on this, but I heard somewhere that when you look at the DSM X, whatever number DSM they're on now, the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual for Disorders or what have you, in there it defines ADD and ADHD, for example, in almost exclusively school vocabulary. So it's something like, and again, I don't have it open on my desk, but it's something like, cannot sit still and listen to teacher talk, or cannot remain in seat for extended periods of time, or cannot focus eyes on the board. This is all school language. Yeah. So take the school context out, and suddenly where's the definition of ADD? So that was really compelling to me when I read that, and I realized, like, wait a minute, this thing that we've been sold is like maybe not, I don't want to say it's not real, but I want to say, like, maybe if you remove the school context, then suddenly people can thrive. And that was kind of my one of my hopes with Acton, was that would turn out to be real. But I have noticed, even without sitting still in a desk, listening to teacher talk and those kind of requirements, that there are some students who are more challenged to not distract, or to be able to pay attention to their own choice thing for extended periods of time. Where do you kind of fall on this? Tell us more about your experience with ADD, ADHD. Yeah. How real is it? What kind of accommodations do people really need?
Okay. Yeah. It can be so controversial. And just through my own research and experiences, I do believe that there is a difference in the brain for some. Mm-hmm. I do think that it's also overdiagnosed.
Okay.
And I think it's often comorbid with language processing differences. I think their brains do tend to, I think it's 40% of the time, they also are diagnosed ADD, ADHD. I also think that even some that are in that zone can maybe not appear that they are, because if they're in an environment like an Acton, it's just not as necessary to sit, to be quiet, to not touch anything, to not tap anything, to not, to just sit quietly is so unnatural for most young learners. And I think that when someone has a hard time having relationships, if they are not safe, overly impulsive, those are the times you have to go, okay, we really need to get a handle on this, because for humans, it's a need to have a relationship. And if you're not able to have a conversation back and forth, or to have appropriate, conversation, and, those executive functioning skills are so vital as you age. Some brains, I do believe, are different and would fall in the ADHD, ADD group, and they may need more than just the Acton environment, meaning medication, or I don't know about talk therapy for kids, or for boys especially. But no, I do think it's a real thing. I just don't believe it's always as large of a group as, I think it's over diagnosed.
Yeah, and
it's an easy thing to say.
School context.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So, okay. So now, I always ask this question too, is that a few years ago at the owners conference in Texas, in Austin, Juan Mauricio Bonifaci, who has the Acton Academy in Guatemala, and Jeff Sandifer, the co-founder of Acton, they had a Socratic discussion, and it was about the A-B choice was Navy SEAL model, which is Jeff, or family model, which was Juanma. Which one would you consider your Acton to be?
The family style. Yeah. And I definitely am warm-hearted, sometimes too much so. And I think there's a fine balance. As it's interesting, because I'm actually really comfortable with Navy SEAL style, with everything very clear, expectations, everything in a box, everything very, clear. I'm comfortable with that because I know when I'm right and I know when I'm wrong in that model. Mm-hmm. In the family model, everyone may go about the same problem a different way, right? And that's totally okay. And the way you feel about something, someone else may not. And as kind of gray area that we live when we're like that, I think it's healthy. I think it's a healthy way. And I think we will raise up very educated, you just kind of very accepting, a very accepting group when you are in an environment that's like that. So I definitely fall on the more warm-hearted family end of the spectrum.
Okay, thank you. And if you could give a family who is thinking about making a radical change out of the traditional system into doing a different type of school, not necessarily Acton, but it could be starting their own or doing, another type of micro school or what have you, unschooling, deschooling, world schooling, whatever. Like, what would be your one piece of advice for them?
Well, if they're thinking about it, there must be a reason, whether it's their own children or their experiences or their dissatisfaction with the environment that they're currently in, and to really explore it. And, no better time to start something new and to go for it if you are able to. And if you're questioning it, there must be a reason. So, to really think about it and start researching public schools, private schools, charter schools, and really kind of find where your heart and your mind lie in the world of education. Our children are all so different. Their needs are so different. And that was why we chose Acton, because I believe that in Acton can serve a wide range of needs and brains. But that's what I would say. If you're feeling prompted and you're really looking for something else, just start reading, watching TED Talks, learning about, young brains and really how they best learn and thrive.
What are some of your favorite books or authors that you've read about education?
So a book I just finished is called Declarative Language. Linda K. Murphy with a PH. Declarative Language. But this is something that is going to support me in being a guide. Declarative language, opposed to imperative language. Declarative is like asking questions. It's more like guiding. You come upon, two learners that are disagreeing, and if they need some guidance, it's very much about helping them see the bigger picture. And I started reading it because of ADD, ADHD, and a lot of times their brains just have a really hard time processing future. So they don't always understand what can happen if, right? And so that is what leads to the being, impulsive and saying things, doing things for attention. They're not thinking of what that can mean for them in the future. So declarative language helps for them to be able to start seeing consequences and understanding that things happen after you do something, and for them to see the whole picture. So that's been my favorite recently.
That's great. What would you walk us through an example? Like, tell us a story about a learner and how you use declarative language to help that learner.
We were in the studio one day, and I was noticing one of our eagles trying to get the attention of another, and it was getting annoying. And the one that was, so Eagle B was the one being sought out, and she was getting annoyed, but didn't quite know how to make him stop, other than saying, stop, 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 right?
Right.
Which we've all heard if you have kids or are around them ever. And so I let it go for a while, you've seen how they may work it out. And then it just started to be like she was having her boundaries invaded, and it was time for an adult. So I got close, I got closer and didn't step in yet. I just my presence, seeing if that would make any kind of a difference. And it sort of was continuing. And here's the declarative language piece. I said to Eagle A, I'm not sure if you realize this, but when you push on her chair with your feet, she is feeling frustrated. It is, I'm not sure if you realize. So it's not shame. There's no, you're bad. There's no, why are you doing this? No, it was just, I'm not sure if you realize this, right? It takes down all their walls. That's the declarative part. I'm not sure if you realize this, but when you are pushing on her chair, it's frustrating her. It's annoying her. So it's making it clear, but it's also taking down the walls by saying, I'm not sure if you realize. So that's the declarative part. And it's keeping it very open, and it's taking off any shame or that kind of.
I love that. As opposed to imperative language, which is like, stop kicking her chair.
Stop kicking her chair. Exactly.
Something without,
It's
I love
leading
that.
them to want to stop. Or
right.
Well, that's why she's saying stop. He literally may not have realized that he was doing something bad. Was what she was saying to stop. And then I then later spoke with Eagle B and suggested, it appeared that you were annoyed by him kicking. Why did that bother you? And letting her share it and getting it off her chest and being seen and heard. And then suggesting, why do you think he kept doing it? And her first answer was just to bother me. And it was, do you think that was why? Does he do that all the time? Does he want to bother you? Is he your friend? And then her coming to the realization of, oh, maybe I should have been more clear. Please don't kick my chair. Or can you put your feet on the floor? Just giving them a way to settle. Yeah.
Lately, we've been talking a lot about metacognition, or making your thoughts visible. And I think that just really relates to what you're saying, of like, almost like you were making her feelings visible to him in a non-judgmental way, so that he could, or she could be like, oh, I am self-aware now, and I will now make a different choice.
Yes,
So
I love that. That's
so
exactly.
Beautiful.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
I think that is one of the greatest blessings of, at least for Acton, and I don't know, maybe other micro schools are like that also, but these kind of new schools, is the emphasis on avoiding shaming, because shaming kicks that amygdala into action, and then all like complex thought is shut down because you're just in survival mode. And then learning has just been arrested. And I think the traditional system has always relied on shame. The culture has always relied on shame, and now
on pleasing the leaders.
Yes,
shame,
right,
and pleasing.
The flip side of that, I guess, in some way. And now this awareness of, I think like Brene Brown has just taken us light years ahead with the shame and vulnerability stuff. Yeah. And the functional MRIs, so that we can really see scientifically what is happening in the brain when shame is introduced. And so this new learning, it just has to be incorporated. If you're going to talk about people learning, you have to incorporate that. And so that's one of the most hopeful and beautiful things I think about our network, is how we are really trying to just get rid of shame as a tactic for controlling people. It doesn't work.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. I agree. And that's our goal, is to have that type of an environment, and to raise up our eagles to be accepting, understanding that people have different ways, different beliefs of doing things and living, and no judgment. Yeah, maybe I choose not to do that, but that doesn't mean that I disrespect you for doing it that way.
Right. Or even I can see how that may not be a great idea, but it doesn't mean I'm judging you as a person. But I can give you more information that might not be a good choice for you.
Right.
So, well, Jana, if I'm a parent in your area and I want to find your school and get in on this, what do I do?
So the best place to start is our website. www.actonconcord.org.
Awesome.
And there's a question and answer spot where you can find lots of information from curriculum to tuition to where we're located. And then reading Courage to Grow gives you a wonderful background and really the platform of what we're all standing on. And then sending in a submission for a phone call or just email me. An email address is also on our website. So we can have a chat and you can come see the property and we can get to know each other, see if it's the right place and see if it's the right choice for all of us.
Excellent. Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful conversation. I've learned so much about you and from you.
You too,
and it's been a real delight. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you too. I love chatting with other like-minded women and, talking. This is just a passion of mine, so it's really exciting. But thank you too, Shannon.
I loved this. It's been a great experience. Thank you so much. And good luck to you.
You too, Shannon. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for listening to the New Schools podcast. Tell a friend. Previous episodes and show notes, including any books or websites our guests recommend, can be found at thenewschools.com. If you're a parent who is looking for a new school for your family, send us a message. We would love to help. We can answer questions, share the resources we have, and help you get in touch with people in your area who are on the same path, determined to provide their kids with the best education. It's wildly important work. Thank you for doing it, and we'll see you next time.